Adventure in Bear Valley. Going to California sure sounded like a grand idea when Ma and Pa were alive, Emily said in a low voice, the hush of the dark woods sending shivers down her spine. Emily's brother Jess glanced wearily at her as he picked up branches of firewood. When Ma and Pa died, we didn't have any choice but to continue heading west. Like many pioneers, their parents had died on the perilous trail to California, and the Hutchinsons, a young pioneer couple, had taken them in. The four of them had traveled for days through the grandest, greenest mountains they had ever seen. They finally set up camp somewhere on the western slopes in California just as the sun's rays faded from the horizon of the late September sky. The Hutchinsons seem plenty nice enough, Emily said, reflecting on friendly Mrs. Hutchinson, a timid woman who spent most of her time in the wagon. We are not their family, Jess said shortly. Don't tie to them just yet. Their wagon train had left the plains of Missouri in April on the promise of hitting pay dirt in Sierra Nevada, gold country by October. A couple weeks ago, their wagon and a few others had split from the main group on a route that would lead them to kin who had already settled in California. Being between hay and grass, Jess had signed on to be Mr. Hutchinson's apprentice after Ma and Pa passed. Mr. Hutchinson, a rather bully blacksmith, planned to sell tools he made to miners. And where Jess went, Emily dutifully followed, helping Mrs. Hutchinson cook and do chores. As they gathered more firewood, Emily heard twigs snap. A low growl came from a clump of trees to the left. Did you hear that? Emily whispered urgently to Jess. Let's head back. I don't like it out here, pleaded Emily as the shadows grew long and the forest turned dark as midnight. Afraid of some old boogeyman? Jess teased gently. Well, I think we got plenty of firewood anyway. Let's get out of here. Walking back to camp, Emily couldn't help glancing over her shoulder every few steps. Just in time, Mr. Hutchinson said with a smile as they returned to camp. I think the fire was about to peter out. Jess scowled. It was just a harmless remark, but lately Jess was like a bear with a sore head around Mr. Hutchinson. Emily, Mrs. Hutchinson's voice interrupted her thoughts. Would you help me bake some biscuits? I'd be glad to, Emily said. She walked over to the covered wagon. It stored everything they owned beneath its rounded canvas cover. Emily fetched a heavy iron skillet Mrs. Hutchinson used to make their meals. Campfire biscuits again? Jess said. I'd give anything for a heaping plate of mass biscuits. Emily knew what he meant. Emily knew what he meant was that he would give anything to have Emma back again. Emily looked at Mr. and Mrs. Hutchinson. They had both winced when Jess mentioned the biscuits. She hoped they didn't think Jess was criticizing Mrs. Hutchinson's cooking. Emily, when we get to Bear Valley, Mrs. Hutchinson said, could you show me how to make your ma's recipe for biscuits? I'm sure mine don't hold a candle to hers. Before Emily could answer, Mr. Hutchinson said, I have good news for you, dear. We just entered Bear Valley. We should be at your brother's homestead in a couple of days. Why do they call it Bear Valley? Emily asked. Mrs. Hutchinson gave her husband a look that said, don't answer that, but he ignored it. The children need to know the dangers in this wilderness, said Elizabeth, he said to his wife. He explained, there are bears in these woods, big black bears. big grizzly bears, and even mountain lions. You need to be careful and don't wander into the woods alone. That night, Emily fell asleep quickly, dragged out by traveling and chores. She tossed and turned throughout the night as she dreamed of strange forest creatures. The next morning, Emily awoke early to find a light frost had blanketed the ground. I'll make flapjacks, she said to herself, wanting to surprise Jess and the Hutchinsons. Emily rebraided her hair as the sun peeked over the mountains, burning off the frost. Emily was dying to change into a clean pressed dress like her mother laid out for her on Sundays, but have to wait. She would have to wait until they reached the homestead. The campfire sputtered, the flames all but dead. Emily leaned over, intending to shake her brother awake to collect wood. But Jess looked so peaceful she couldn't bring herself to wake him. She wrapped up in a blanket and headed into the woods. The morning was strangely silent, and a brisk westerly wind blew through the giant spruce trees. The sun had yet to penetrate the canopy of the evergreens. Emily shivered. She gathered wood, moving quickly. With her arms loaded with damp, dead wood, she turned back to camp. Again, she heard a low growl, and her spine stiffened. The sound came closer. Emily was too terrified to move. Her stomach tightened. She would never see Jess again. Just then, Jess leaped from behind the giant spruce tree wearing a big grin. Emily started. I should feed you bark and dirt for that bush, Jess Edward. Jess tried unsuccessfully to stifle his laughter. I was going to make you Ma's recipe for flapjacks, Emily taunted. Now I've got second thoughts. Jess smiled, unapologetic. Hold your horses, I was just joking. You know I love Ma's flapjacks. Jess took some of the wood from Emily as she pinched his arm. Teasing like this made Jess's troubled face look almost happy. When they returned, Mr. Hutchinson smiled and Emily smiled back. Jess flinched. Mr. Hutchinson was feeding the oxen. It was Jess's job to feed the animals in the morning, and he thought Mr. Hutchinson might have a blow up. But Mr. Hutchinson held his tongue as if he was angry. I'm making flapjacks, Emily explained. Mr. Hutchinson grinned. Elizabeth loves flapjacks, he said, and so do I. Okay, so those are the pages that we need to read for day one. Let me now go to the ELA packet here, and then so as I said in the directions, boys and girls, you're going to do only 2 circle maps, and let's see here. So 2 circle maps, and you choose which circle maps to do. Okay, you can look at the phrases inside. For example, for the first one, there's a phrase here, between hay and grass. Okay, so this is a phrase and it means something. If you go back to the reading, these phrases are in bold, meaning with really dark black letters. Find the phrases and then try to figure out the meaning of it based on the context clues or what is around that one phrase, okay? The sentences and the words around it. For example, here's Peter out, and then hold a candle. Does it really mean to hold a candle, or is it a saying or an idiom to mean something else? Okay, and then the other one is flapjacks. So you might want to go back to the text and find them, reread the little chunk, and then see if you can figure out the meaning of them based on context clues. Otherwise, I did see in the directions that you can look at the glossary, and it comes with the meaning or the definition. And so select the 2 that you're going to be working with today, and then you already know how this goes. You complete complete the four corners of the circle map. Okay, doing all of those activities. And then day one, also, you're going to have to read all of this, but I'm going to explain it with my own words. Based on these pages that we read, you're going to make an inference, okay? And so, as I said in my directions, you don't have to do two, you can only do one. And so if you only make one inference, then you don't need the two thinking maps. You would only need one of the thinking maps here. This right here, this is an example, okay, as to how to complete your thinking map. It's a flow map, and if you notice here, it says I infer that. So this is your inference here, okay? Inference. And then here's your context clues, your details from the text, and prior knowledge. That means what you already knew. For example, this person is making this inference. It says, I infer that Jess and Emily's parents got sick or badly injured and died because there wasn't the appropriate medical care while traveling west. So this is what some student is inferring or guessing, okay, that Jess and Emily's parents died because there was no medical care when they were traveling. Now, why is the student inferring this? Well, because in the text, notice the quotation marks. In the text, it says their parents had died on the perilous trail to California. So this is the evidence from the text to support the inference. And then besides that, we need to say what we know. Well, one thing I already know is that many people died from illnesses while traveling west to California. Okay, so because of these two things, we can make this inference right here. And so that's what you need to do with your thinking map here. Okay, make your inference and then evidence from the text. And then this is basically your own explanation, okay, of what you already knew that you're connecting to your inference. And then this one says speaking frame. This is just for you to practice saying your inference out loud. And that helps you in case you were to write it, okay? But you don't have to. For this one, you only have to complete a thinking map. Practice saying the inference with the speaking frame, and you're done with that one. And then lastly, you have a writing prompt for day one. In the writing prompt, this is just one paragraph, okay? Make sure that you read the directions. I am just going to go ahead and read the prompt and then explain a little of the thinking map, and then I'll let you work. The prompt says, why? Why are Emily and Jess traveling with the Hutchinsons? Why are they traveling with this couple whose last name is Hutchinsons? Why? And then you're going to answer here. Okay, so remember that you turn the question into a statement always. So why are Emily and Jess traveling with the Hutchinsons? You can say Emily and Jess are traveling with the Hutchinson. The Hutchinsons because, and then I'm going to put a blank here because that's your job, okay? If you didn't get it at the beginning on the first read, remember to always go back, reread, and then find out why they are traveling with that couple, okay? And so you would just complete the blank here, okay? And that's your claim, that is your answer. And then you need 1, 2, 3 details or evidence from the text. Make sure that for each box, you have, I'm going to put here detail. And then if you can provide an explanation, that's always good because you always want to elaborate, okay? So do the same thing for each one, detail, and then your explanation. And then same thing here. I'm just going to put D and then E for detail and explanation, okay? And so you do that for each of the boxes. And now that you have all of your ideas here in this thinking map, if you keep on reading, make sure that you read all of these directions, you never skip them. Then you go ahead and write down your response in here. If you need more paper, you can always use a separate piece of paper like Caitlin did with the essay that she wrote and that I showed you last time. Okay, and that way you can write a nice and neat paragraph. Okay, and so that's it for day one. Besides this, don't forget to go to read your pages for what is it? Wonder. Today, day one, you needed to read pages 3 to 18 of the Wonder book. And then you need to go to Google Classroom too and respond to that question that I posted in there. Okay, on Wednesday, and then on Friday you'll do the other one. Okay, so that is one for day one. Again, make sure that you call me if you need help with this.